Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Louella Fernandes, CEO of Quocirca, and today I'm joined by Richard Wells, Head of Market Development at EpsonEurope. We'll be discussing Epson's new circular leasing program in Europe. So welcome to the show, Richard. It's great to have you here today.
Hi, Louella, and great to be with you. Thanks very much for the opportunity to update you about some of the work that we're doing.
Yes, so before we get into the conversation, could you tell us a bit about your role at EpsonEurope? Because I know that's changed quite recently.
Yes, of course, we're happy to. I'd moved on from my role as head of sales for the UK and Ireland for office products for Epson just over 18 months ago to move into a new role, which is, as you mentioned, the head of market development. That's a strange sort of title, and it can mean many things to different people. What it means within EpsonEurope is myself and a couple of colleagues are tasked with assisting the business units, and we have many business units in Epson covering many products, to sort of start the journey of how we develop into the Epson of the future, which will fall into line with the technologies of the future, but doing it in a controlled way so that we're expanding all market opportunities for the products we've got as we start to integrate more and more different technologies and start the transition to where we'll end up. I often refer to myself as a lemon squeezer. Yeah, my job is to squeeze some more juice out of the lemon, i.e. to make sure that the areas of our main operations, such as prints and projection, stay as relevant for as long as possible by developing tools, partnerships, and alliances that may help us stay stronger for longer in those markets.
Yeah, so sustainability has always been, very core to Epson's corporate strategy, I guess. And it's interesting to read about Epson's new circular leasing program, which you've launched in Europe, which I guess is very much focused on developing a closed loop approach around the products from when they're sold to end of lease and being returned for refurbishment or reuse or recycling. So really interesting initiative. Could you tell us a bit more about that and how it will be developed in Europe?
Yeah, happy to try and give an understanding. And probably it's best to start with the essence of why we have a lease program is actually for our reuse program, which is one of the fundamental reasons that we look at sustainability in every area that we can sort of manage with that. Reuse or using a product for as long as possible is central in both our corporate aims as a business and a responsible manufacturer, but also in societal need, that we need to make sure that the resources, when they are extracted, are used to the fullest extent rather than becoming waste products way too early. And that was really what's driven the need for our program to feed our reuse program. So by reuse, we mean recycle, remanufacture, refurbish, recondition. There are many other RE words that are used in the industry, and there's many understandings of what they are. But for us, it's about making sure that you get the most out of the resources you've used to create the products, and that we keep products in use for as long as they can possibly be used, whilst they still have a relevant use in the marketplace. So that's where we sort of really started the program off for our reuse. We very quickly realized, as an indirect supplier predominantly of our products across the board, that one of the challenges is, of course, can I get enough product to be able to refurbish enough that the demand that the market is continually growing to, and that position. And that was a resounding no, we can't get enough products back, mainly because we've got an excellent partners in the channel across all of our products, whether it be projection, wide formats, till printers, label printers, and of course office printing as well. And those partners already take a sustainable approach to the use of the equipment. So they are already reusing the equipment and either keeping it in customers for longer because maybe volumes have dropped and there's more life left on the equipment than was originally planned, or alternatively, they've used it for another customer so that there's two people using Epson equipment rather than one. And quite rightly, we don't want to interfere with that. That's a great way for them to manage their businesses. But it does mean it's a little bit hard for us to acquire the equipment we would like to win some of the contracts that we're aiming to try and win, where there is a compliancy requirement to have refurbished equipment included, but also a morally just sort of argument to include refurbished, particularly for some of the applications for print that has evolved over the last 5 years. So we needed find a way of getting some supply. And one of the best ways, of course, is if we are arranging leases where we have the right to buy the equipment at the end of the lease, we can automatically ensure that we're going to have the supply for that demand that is coming and is already here.
Okay, and we'll come back shortly to the potential role the channel has to play in this new closed loop programme, because as you say, partners are already doing some of this activity themselves. But before that, I think it's useful to define the difference between a refurbished device and a remanufactured printer, because we see in the market a bit of confusion around those terms. And it'd be good to understand how Epson officially defines those terms in the context of this new leasing programme.
Okay, how long have we got for this interview? It could take a while. Now, all joking aside, I think there is a confusion within the industry, within users and within manufacturers, to what is meant by the various terms that are used. So you're quite right to ask the question the way you did. How do Epson interpret the various terms? So we are predominantly looking at refurbishment, because for us, that's the least intrusive way to give a second life. So our interpretation is products that have had a first life are put into a working order that they can have a useful second life, but they are not changed into something different than they were. So the product is the same product. It keeps its product name. It keeps its meter reading. So there's no we're very transparent. There is no illusion about how much work that product has done, but the work that's required to turn it into a useful product for a second life, is carried out to Epson standards, that are verified, whether that be done in through our own provision, or whether it be done within our resellers and service network. And that means that a customer can be sure that they're buying a quality product that has a useful life for the period of time that they're looking to. So that's really how we sort of define that. Within Epson worldwide, we have many reuse programs for different products which are relevant to the marketplace, and in our head office environment in Japan, our sales business in Japan actually market a remanufactured version of our high-end products, which are specifically aimed at the education sector, where there's high volume of print required, but perhaps sometimes the budgeting doesn't allow for a brand new product. So we're committed to that program in Japan. But in Europe, we feel that the European market is much more comfortable with refurbished, as long as they're told what refurbished actually is.
Yeah, it's all about providing that clarity around those definitions. And you mentioned the education sector there. And in Europe, there's more types of organisations that are receptive to remanufactured or refurbished devices. We're definitely seeing that in our latest sustainability research. Would you say, because, obviously you say one of the motivations for this was to help Epson get access to these larger tenders, would that be more in certain sectors like public sector or certain regions that you're seeing more demand for these refurbished devices?
I think typically the public funded organisations, are very much at the forefront, normally supported by a policy or regulation that they have a requirement to ensure that a certain percentage of what they're procuring under a framework agreement is and has had a second use, so is refurbished or remanufactured. And we're seeing more clarity in tenders coming through. Some countries are slightly more advanced than others, but there is a general drift towards a requirement for publicly funded organisations to have at least part of that inventory that to be something that's had a life before. The leading light, I would say, in this is probably France. France seemed to be a little bit ahead of most places, although most of the main countries are not far behind. And actually, demand in emerging technologies in places such as Poland, we're seeing quite a lot of requirement for refurbished products there. And this is where it gets quite interesting for Epson, because Epson is not a print company and has never been just a print company. You know, it's been multi-technologies, and we've got a huge part of our business which is dedicated to visual projection. And we're seeing a big growth in that area, mainly because of changing teaching methods here in the classroom, where suddenly classes are much bigger than they used to be. Perhaps classes are being combined and multi-age groups are being taught in the same environment. And therefore, you need the biggest possible display that you can have. And our projectors can give 100, 120, even much larger size projection than that, without taking wall space up with, large screens that use a lot of power. So in that sort of environment, we're seeing that the first signs that there is a requirement for high brightness projection within classrooms. Now, that will in some cases require an element of the equipment to be refurbished. So it's not just about refurbishing printers and photocopiers. It'll be very much looking at all of the technology we produce, and are they the right things to be refurbished? And if they are, then we will very much be looking to include them in our programs of products availability.
That's really interesting to understand that Epson is approaching this for both its print devices and its visual products as well. So, and as you say, many customers, I guess, will have needs for both print devices and projectors. So, yeah, and I guess refurbishment is important in both those areas. I think that's also quite good in terms of understanding the role of the channel, because I guess your channel partners are potentially selling both products as well, visual projection products and printers. And you mentioned before that you're working very closely with the partners. You see it as something you're supporting the channel partners to be part of this circular leasing program. So, I guess the channel may have some questions around whether there would be potential channel conflict between Epson and themselves. So could you talk a bit about how you really plan to address that?
Yes, happy to. And this is a really important area for us, because we build our business on our channel, and our channel partnerships are some of the strongest in the industry, I believe. We've got some of the best innovative and, conscientious resellers who are very keen to take our sustainable heat-free message through on the print side, and also the sort of 3LCD message of our projection followed through into our more high brightness projectors using laser engines, where of course then it's about size matters and sort of terminology like that. So we've got the right people that we work with, and they have delivered wonderful results for us and continue to do so, and will continue to do so going forward. Where we've realized that in certain product areas, and particularly in the office print area, we can't quite reach, either together or individually where we would like to be on some of the larger contracts, where we have end users who are very keen to have access to the Epson products, but because of some of the restrictions in budget that they have, because of some of the needs that they have to perhaps only deal with manufacturers, that we've been excluded and our dealers have been excluded for some of those sort of opportunities. We want to enter some of those opportunities, and we want to have a small share of that market, and then grow that. But we'll be growing it with our channel. We will be looking to deliver solutions in partnership and collaboration. We'll be looking to use the facilities that our channel have in partnership, and we may have to look at the structure of deals in a slightly different way than perhaps they could have been looked at before. But again, I would re-emphasize, we're only looking where we've not been operating before. So this is new territory for Epson and its resellers, and therefore there's only opportunity and there's only extra business for both parties.
Yeah, so it sounds like Epson's very much working with partners to support them win new business that it may not have had access to before.
Exactly.
So in terms of, we've mentioned that sustainability has always been sort of very strongly embedded in Epson's strategy, and we've talked a bit about refurbishment, but I'm interested to understand in the broader context, we know already that Epson is committed to a sustainable product portfolio. How does refurbishment fit into its broader strategy? Because obviously you still have your new products, and I know you've got a very interesting way of defining different categories across your portfolio.
Yeah, probably use quite a well-used terminology within Epson, at least, and I think it is broader. I think many of our, friends and colleagues and competitors in the industry use similar terminology, but there is a term of use, reuse, which is sort of embedded in a lot of what we do, which goes back to that principle of getting the most from a piece of equipment. And whilst I don't want to just talk about print sometimes allows us to sort of have a understanding a little bit easier than certain other technologies. In the print market, there's no two ways about it. Print volumes are going down for cut sheet papers. Other parts of print are growing, such as our sort of signage business, our fabric printing and things like that. But the number of pages being printed in Europe has dramatically reduced in the last 5 years. Some of that because of COVID, some of it because of change of work pattern, some of it because we are at the sort of farther side of the longevity of print in office environments. So it's naturally it's reducing. With that being the case, products that are produced that perhaps have a life of 4, 5, 6 million, as is the case with our workforce enterprise range of products, those volumes are not being hit in first life. So perhaps after 3, 4, 5 years, even in high volume environments, there's still a lot of working life left. And particularly with Epson products, which have so few moving parts, and because they use no heat, there's not the wear and tear that is normal in perhaps other technologies that are out there. So we're seeing that there's a lot of useful life at the end of first life. And that means that second and possibly even third life, can be contemplated. However, I'll go back a step, and this is another phrase that you've heard me use before. We have a sort of good, better, best approach to pretty much everything in Epson. And for us, good is actually what we're now introducing. So a vendor refurbished product that has been refurbished by Epson for a second life because it was returned to Epson. That's good use of a resource, that becomes about us. What is a better use is if it doesn't get returned to Epson because it is retained in the market, and in the market by our channel partners who use it for its second life. I mentioned earlier in the call that's already happening, and our partners are doing an excellent job in using the products for a second life because they found exactly that sort of situation that I talked about. Products that have good life left and maybe they need to go into a second location. So we try to make sure that our dealers can access parts, warranties, extended warranties, second life warranties to ensure they can maximize the amount of benefit they and their customers get from those machines. For us, best is when a product never moves from where it was situated in the first place. It's got a lot of life left, so it's allowed to stay where it is, so the reseller keeps it with the original customer and provides flexibility to them that wouldn't have otherwise been there. Perhaps an extension of a lease agreement that gives them second life use of the equipment. But most importantly, and this is where Epson supports, is where we provide a second life warranty. So every person in the chain can be happy that there is good quality support that can be maintained for an extended period of time. So for us, yes, it's use, reuse, but following a good, better, best program.
What that really demonstrates in terms of that good, better, best is the fact that Epson now has a very strong strategy around, the new devices as well as vendor refurbishment, which I think we're seeing other vendors in the space moving into that. And it's great that Epson now has a strategy for that, particularly that, that it can help support its channel partners as well there, because one thing that we see with our research is that some of the top requirements for sustainable devices are typically around energy efficiency, which I know is very strong selling point for Epson's heat-free devices, but also device longevity. And we are seeing that many organizations are keeping those devices for much longer than, the standard 3 or 5 year MPS contracts. So, definitely an interesting space for us to follow. In terms of Epson's key targets and planned investments, I guess, for the circular leasing program leading up to 2026. How significant do you expect this model to be relative to your traditional sales by that date? Can you share any plans for next year? I guess it's still early days in terms of rolling out the program, but yeah, anything in terms of what's next for this program in 2026?
I'll try to, without sort of belying any confidences that we have about really what our next sort of plans are. What I will say is we expect to be doing a significant amount of business through the programs of using lease to enter markets that we previously were not able to operate in, to where we are operating and where leasing has already been used, but not as flexibly as is maybe required by the end users. We'll be looking to assist the channel and, sort of develop new offerings that may work better for both parties. A good example will be we're very successful in the industrial print market and the textile print market, and we have very large machines here in this market and they typically have a very long life. These products produce huge quantities of meterage, whether it be of labels, of roll-fed materials, and including and not forgetting about fabric, which is again a very, very important area for us. So we're really keen to see use of leasing to encourage those extra placements that perhaps are a little bit of a difficult decision for people, around Europe, where perhaps CapEx has been a chosen route before, and having a leasing arrangement and perhaps a flexibility of leasing arrangement that wasn't typically available before, that may encourage a few extra placements, because that's what we would like to see growth from that area. But I do expect us to do a significant amount, even though not a high volume of contracts. We're trying to pick the right placements where we have absolute growth, where we couldn't compete before, particularly in the office environment, whether it be for projection or whether it be for print. It'll be working with our partners, identifying opportunities where we could get growth that we couldn't have competed previously, and making sure that that is an option for us to now be a player in that, and that will grow. What size, what value? Perhaps another day I'll share those numbers, just in case my boss is listening and gives me a new target.
Yeah, that's really useful to know, because I guess as you're at the early days of rolling this program out, and are there any particular regions? I know you mentioned France before. Are there any particular ones you're starting with, or is it pretty much across Europe that this program is going to be available?
Yeah, the plan is to make the program available across the majority of Europe, where leasing provision is readily available through mainline funders, because one of the requirements often can be pan-European deals. So we have to work with partners who can deliver a solution across multiple regions. So for that reason, we're partnered with BNP Paribas, who was announced a few weeks ago, and will shortly be announcing a second partner that we will work with. But we're going to focus on 6 countries initially, which will be a relatively short pilot, will help us prove that our thinking is correct. And they are the markets of UK, of France, of Italy, of Spain, and Poland and Germany. So those 6, give us a good spread. They give us a foot into Central Europe, where there is a lot of growth to be had, but it's an emerging market. But working with the traditional larger countries where historically we've placed more equipment, and where the use of tools such as leasing is common and more accepted. But we will be looking, once the pilot is concluded successfully, to then look at the map and try and make sure that we give as good a coverage as we possibly can, and try and address all territories.
Yeah, and I think 2026 sounds like it's going to be a very exciting and interesting time for Epson in terms of rolling this out. And, it'd be great to do a follow-up to sort of next year at some point, to understand a bit more about, adoption rates and so on. In the meantime, we're sort of nearing the end of 2025, and we're about to release the Quocirca predictions for 2026. Have you got anything you would like to share in terms of maybe one prediction that you think will shape the print industry in 2026?
I can probably do better than one. I like to work in threes, and so
Okay.
I'll give you three areas that I think will be focus areas in the coming 12 months. And the first really is driven by consumer. I think consumer demand is changing. Maybe people have bought their last ever printer. That's not the sort of thing that we want to hear, at manufacturers such as Epson, but we're not frightened of it. It's about how people will use that equipment. And as we've been talking in this interview, we expect the life of equipment, particularly high quality equipment, that uses heat-free technology to ensure that the product will last a long time. Those products could be around for quite a long time. And we see a shift to higher value printing. And what I mean by that is most people are starting to move away from printing everything. They are more discerning about what needs to be printed. But when they do print, they want a really good print, because what is being produced and what will be produced will change. And products that can handle high quality stocks that give really good, image quality, I think will start to sort of, shape really where things are going. And I think that will continue. So if I moved way beyond the next 12 months, I think we'll see, the clock going back in a way, in that actually you'll see the growth of pay for print to a much greater degree. We're already seeing it through other products such as our signage printers, our graphics photo printers, where actually the demand and the amount of prints being done on those devices is actually surging upwards. And it's surging upwards because people want less print, but when they have it, they want it to be absolutely the best. And in those markets, we are certainly the market leaders and known for the highest quality print reproduction. So that's my first. I think consumer use of print is changing, and we'll start to see some more signs of that. I think in the MPS industry, we've seen a lot of consolidation over the last 18 months around production of equipment. So this is from the manufacturers and the vendors themselves. I don't think we've seen the end of that. I think there will be polarization to a small number of players who either merge, join forces. We've seen some of that in the last 12 months, or alternatively stay independent, but acquire their equipment from third-party manufacturers who, may have been formed out of partnerships, or maybe production sites that already exist in other parts of the world, where people are buying their equipment and then rebranding it to their specifications. So I think we'll see more of that. And the final thing is, I think we're going to see more move to print as a service and subscriptions services, not just within the sort of common markets of the corporate user who's used to DAS, and that moves to PAS. I hate these terms, the AASs, but, they do sum it up. We do think the initiatives such as Recycle as a service that you see from organizations such as SCC Recycler will continue to grow in that space. And obviously we'd like to be part of that as we go forward as well. But I do think, the subscription for business users will actually start to move from just the corporates and the more traditional subscription services that are really for consumer, and I think they'll enter the business space, and they will start to filter through to more SMBs as well as the larger organizations which sit just under the corporate. So sorry, 3 for the price of 1. Hopefully you didn't mind.
No, that was great. Some really excellent predictions, actually. And I definitely agree with you in terms of the shift to high value printing. That really seems to be where the market growth is, particularly around commercial printing. And we're also seeing from a demographic perspective that actually the younger generation are really interested in those high value prints as well. So I think it's a real opportunity for companies like Epson to gain influence with that younger generation that will be part of that movement towards high value printing and better quality prints as well. And the other aspect you mentioned, definitely market consolidation. I think we can definitely expect to see more of that. And the subscription economy, I think, again, MPS has always been part of that model, but we also expect to see some change around business services as a service. And I liked your suggestion around recycling as a service, because we're still not seeing a great, as broad uptake as we would want to see, perhaps in the recycling of products and consumables and so on. So I think, that was really some great predictions there. So we'll have to meet up again next year and see if any of those
this time next year we will see where we are.
Yeah. So but thanks again so much for joining me. It's been really great to have an update on Epson's circular leasing program. We'll put some more information in the show notes if there's any links that you want to share for the audience, and I look forward to catching up with you again to see how everything has progressed. So thanks again for your time today.
No, thank you for yours. It's been a pleasure.
So thank you for joining today's episode of In the Spotlight with Quocirca. For more information, please visit quocirca.com and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.